Ladies and gentlemen, don't trust anyone, because to walk this life with open eyes is to see that the soul of man is a labyrinth. Every individual carries within them a vast undiscovered world, a landscape littered with masks, shadows, and archetypes. And so I say, do not trust anyone, not because the world is filled with malice, but because even the most well-meaning individual does not fully know themselves. How can you entrust your fate to someone who walks in darkness, unaware of the very forces that shape their choices? We project upon others what we have not yet resolved within. That which we call love may be a longing to be completed. That which we call hate may be a rejection of what we refuse to acknowledge in ourselves. And thus, the person before you is not merely who they appear to be. They are also the sum of their unconscious desires, fears, wounds, and repressed truths. To trust blindly is to hand your soul to a mirror and pray that it reflects truth. There is no evil greater than the unexamined self. Not out of intent, but out of ignorance, people become vessels for harm. The mother who shelters too much, the friend who flatters to hide envy, the lover who loves not you, but their image of you. They do not see the strings that move them. And if they cannot see their own strings, how could they possibly hold yours without entangling them in illusion? True trust is not a naive leap, but a slow revelation. It is earned through the confrontation of one's shadow. The moment a person stands before you, not as a curated persona, but as someone who has faced the abyss within themselves, and returned not with answers, but with humility, only then can there be a foundation strong enough to carry trust. But such souls are rare, and even they are not without fault. Therefore, it is wise to walk with awareness. To say, don't trust anyone, is not to say, live in fear. It is to say, become discerning. Look beyond the mask. Ask who is speaking, the person or the archetype they unconsciously serve. Are they choosing freely, or are they being pulled by forces they've never dared to name? And if you seek trust, start not with others, but with yourself. Know your own depths. Discover the parts of you that you've hidden, repressed, denied. For in doing so, you will begin to see clearly. Your vision will no longer be clouded by projection. You will no longer be seduced by what appears whole or repelled by what seems broken. You will see the raw truth of people, not to judge, but to understand. Then and only then you may begin to trust, but not as the blind do, not with illusions of perfection, not with the fantasy that someone will save you from yourself. Trust then becomes a conscious choice, not a reflex. It becomes a sacred risk, not a desperate need. So do not trust anyone until you have learned to see, for in the end, the world is not dangerous because it is filled with bad people. It is dangerous because it is filled with unconscious people. And no unconscious person can truly be trusted, not even yourself, until you awaken. We believe we are the authors of our lives. We believe that the choices we make stem from reason, from clarity, from the conscious domain of our minds. But this belief is an illusion, a necessary fiction that spares us the terror of realizing that more often than not, we are but actors on a stage, reading lines written by forces we have never met. The human psyche is not a simple machine. It is a vast, layered reality, more complex than any landscape the eye has seen. And at its core lies a paradox. The one who thinks, who decides, who speaks, the conscious self, is only a fragment of a much larger whole. The ego, the I with which we identify, is like the tip of an iceberg. Beneath it lies the unconscious, immense, ancient, and largely invisible. In this invisible realm dwell instincts, traumas, collective symbols, forgotten experiences, and the archetypal stories of humanity itself. These elements do not remain silent. They push and pull at the conscious mind, bending our desires, shaping our fears, dictating our attractions and repulsions. They are the silent architects of our motivations. And because we do not see them, we believe that we are moving of our own free will. What we call motivation is often the rational justification for a choice already made beneath the surface. We say, "Sin, I chose this path because it made sense," when in truth we were already leaning toward it, drawn by something we could not name. Perhaps a childhood wound led us there. Perhaps a symbol embedded in our unconscious responded to something in the outer world. We believe we are in command, but the wheel turns by unseen hands. Consider the person who dedicates their life to helping others. Noble, we might say, altruistic. But look deeper. What drove them there? Is it love or is it guilt? Is it compassion or the unhealed trauma of never having been seen? Does their kindness spring from wholeness or from a hunger to be validated, to finally be enough? Without that internal excavation, no one, not even the individual themselves, can say for sure, or the one who endlessly seeks power, recognition, control. The world calls them ambitious, focused. But who are they beneath the surface? Was there once a child who felt powerless, ignored, shamed? Is this hunger for achievement a way to silence the voice that once said, "Why, you are nothing"? What looks like strength may be fear in disguise. What appears as confidence may be a mask worn over a fractured soul. The tragedy is not that we are influenced by the unconscious. The tragedy is that we refuse to acknowledge it. We deny the depths. We insist we are clear-eyed, rational, in control. But this denial only strengthens the grip of the unknown. That which is repressed does not disappear. It grows in the shadows, takes on a distorted shape, and returns disguised as fate. This is why relationships unravel without warning, why people sabotage what they love, why someone who claims to seek peace keeps finding conflict, why joy is often followed by guilt and success by emptiness. The conscious mind cannot explain it, but the unconscious knows. It has always known. We are not singular beings. We are constellations, networks of inner figures, each with its own agenda. There is the child within, still weeping, the parent still scolding, the lover, the exile, the shadow, the hero. They speak through our impulses, our dreams, our gut reactions. And unless we sit with them, name them, befriend them, they will rule us from within. To become conscious of one's motivations is no small task. It requires a descent, a willingness to enter the underworld of the psyche, to peel back the layers of self-deception, to ask not what I want, but why I want it. It is the difference between saying angry and asking, inside me is angry, and what are they protecting? The moment this question is asked, the real work begins. And what resistance rises to meet it? For the unconscious protects its contents like a vault. It fears disruption. The ego, too, is terrified of losing its illusions. It clings to the idea that it is good, noble, rational, correct. To suggest otherwise is to invite a kind of death, the death of the known self. But this death is necessary. It is the crucible through which a more whole, integrated being is born. For when we begin to know our unconscious motivations, we reclaim power. We are no longer tossed about by emotions we cannot name. We are no longer seduced by external rewards that leave us hollow. We begin to act from a deeper place, a place where the soul has been heard. Motivation then is no longer reactive but creative. It is not a symptom but a signal. And in time we begin to see others more clearly as well. We no longer take their actions at face value. We sense the pain behind their anger, the fear behind their pride. We stop idolizing or demonizing, and instead we understand. We know that they too are being moved by forces they do not yet comprehend. This awareness breeds compassion, but it also demands responsibility. We can no longer blame fate or others or circumstance. The question turns inward. What within me is leading me here? In this way, the unconscious becomes not a trap, but a teacher, not an enemy, but a map. The deeper we go, the more whole we become. And from that wholeness, true freedom arises. Not the freedom to do whatever we want, but the freedom to know why we want it. So we must make the inward turn. We must listen for the voice beneath the noise. We must dare to uncover the stories we have buried, the patterns we have inherited, the emotions we have refused. This is the path of the conscious human. This is the real revolution, not in politics or power, but in the soul. For when enough people begin to live from that place, not of ego but of integration, the world itself will shift. Our institutions will reflect wholeness. Our relationships will carry depth. Our work will become meaningful. But it begins with one person, one question, one brave look into the mirror of the unconscious. And perhaps then we will see the self we thought we were was only the beginning. And the motivations we trusted so blindly were not truly ours. They were echoes. Echoes waiting to be reclaimed. Echoes longing to become a voice. Let us listen. Let us remember. Let us awaken. We do not see others as they are. We see them as we are. And perhaps nowhere is this more tragically evident than in the act of blind trust. A trust not grounded in discernment, but in longing, in wounds, in unmet needs that echo from the cavernous places of the self. We believe we are opening our hearts to another. In truth, we are opening our past. What we call trust is often not the fruit of knowing another's soul, but the flowering of an inner fantasy, one we have carried long before the person arrived. Blind trust is not born of clarity. It is born of absence. It grows in the soil of the unresolved, the unacknowledged, the unhealed. It is the child who once yearned to be held and now reaches for anyone who seems warm. It is the adolescent who was not seen and now entrusts themselves to those who offer attention. It is the adult who cannot bear uncertainty, who surrenders to authority, not because it has earned their faith, but because uncertainty awakens the chaos of childhood. We are all of us beings of immense complexity. Within us live not one voice, but many. Inner children, archetypes, shadows, inherited patterns. Each of these internal figures has needs, and those needs shape the way we perceive the world. When we say, I trust you, it may be the voice of a wounded part, hoping, praying, clinging to the idea that someone will finally fill the emptiness. And so we cast another person in a role we have written, often unconsciously, based on our earliest relationships, our deepest longings, and our darkest fears. This is the essence of projection. We see not with the eyes, but with the psyche. We do not observe, we imagine. We do not know, we believe. And these beliefs are powerful. They paint the world in color or in shadow. They shape our interactions, our expectations, our judgments. Projection is not a choice. It is a reflex. It is the psyche's attempt to complete what was never completed, to resolve what was never resolved. But when we confuse projection with perception, we fall into illusion. And illusion is the birthplace of blind trust. Imagine a person who has never known real safety. Perhaps they grew up in a home where affection was inconsistent, where presence was conditional. That child, grown into an adult, will carry within them a hunger, not just for connection, but for something more fundamental, the restoration of safety. And so, when they meet someone who offers them even a fragment of that, they may attach quickly, trust deeply, give themselves without hesitation. But it is not trust. It is hope disguised as trust. It is the psyche reaching backward through the body of another, hoping to rewrite the original story. This dynamic plays out in every form of human relationship. We see it in romance, where one partner becomes the savior, the protector, the ideal. We see it in friendship, where dependency replaces mutuality. We see it in leadership, where authority figures are worshipped not for their character, but for the illusion they represent. We see it in spiritual communities, where blind faith in a teacher or system masks the deep yearning to belong. In all of these, trust has been hijacked by the unconscious. It is not a conscious offering, it is a plea. But the psyche cannot be deceived forever. Sooner or later, the cracks appear. The person we trusted fails us, not necessarily because they are unworthy, but because no one can live up to the myth we have projected onto them. The savior becomes flawed. The protector withdraws. The ideal shows signs of humanity, and we feel betrayed, but the betrayal is not theirs alone. We have betrayed ourselves by giving away something sacred, our discernment, our sovereignty, our self-awareness. It is not wrong to trust. Trust is the foundation of intimacy, the soil from which love grows. But blind trust is not trust. It is surrender without wisdom, and it arises not from strength, but from fragmentation. To truly trust, one must first see. One must first know who is looking and why. What part of the self is speaking? What wound is being reawakened? What need is reaching out for fulfillment? These questions are not easy. They require a level of self-inquiry that most avoid. For to ask them is to confront the possibility that our relationships are less about the other and more about ourselves. It is to admit that much of what we call love is reenactment, that much of what we call loyalty is fear of abandonment, that much of what we call trust is a refusal to be alone with our pain. But there is another path, a deeper one, a harder one. It begins with the inward turn, the courageous act of becoming intimate with one's own shadow. When we sit with our unmet needs, our unresolved memories, our inherited patterns, we begin to see clearly. We no longer need to project them outward. We no longer need others to carry what we have not yet faced. We no longer need to trust blindly because we begin to trust consciously. In this way, trust becomes a choice, not a compulsion. It becomes something we offer slowly, with care, with attention. We listen not just to what someone says, but to how we feel in their presence. We notice our reactions. Are they familiar? Are they exaggerated? Do they echo old stories? We ask ourselves, am I seeing this person, or am I seeing a version of someone I needed long ago? This kind of trust is not romantic. It is not dramatic. It does not intoxicate. But it is real. It is rooted in truth. And it can only emerge when we stop using others to complete our story and start writing it ourselves. There is great humility in this process, for we must admit that we have been mistaken, that we have trusted too quickly, loved too blindly, surrendered too easily. We must grieve not only the people who failed us, but the parts of ourselves that reached for them with such desperation. We must forgive ourselves for the illusions we created, for they were born not of foolishness but of pain. And then something shifts. We begin to see people as they are, not as angels or demons, but as complex beings with their own shadows, their own projections, their own wounds. We no longer seek perfection. We seek presence. We seek truth. And we give others the space to be human, to be flawed, to be real. This is the alchemy of self-awareness. Blind trust dissolves. Projection fades, and in its place grows a kind of quiet wisdom, a wisdom that listens, that waits, that discerns, a wisdom that does not abandon the heart, but brings the mind into its service, a wisdom that knows to trust is to risk, yes, but to trust blindly is to abandon oneself. We cannot control how others will behave. We cannot guarantee that we will not be hurt, but we can choose to know ourselves. We can choose to become intimate with the inner forces that shape our trust. We can choose to stop asking others to heal what only we can tend to. This is not cynicism. It is maturity. It is the evolution from wounded child to conscious adult. And from this place, we begin to build relationships differently. We do not rush. We do not idealize. We do not give ourselves away. Instead, we open gradually. We allow time to reveal character. We allow presence to build connection. We allow truth to guide intimacy. In doing so, we honor both ourselves and the other. For when trust is not demanded but earned, when it is not blind but discerning, it becomes sacred. It becomes a bridge not built on fantasy but on the solid ground of reality. Let us not settle for illusion. Let us not confuse need with love, hope with truth, projection with intimacy. Let us have the courage to see not just others but ourselves. Let us reclaim the parts we have scattered across relationships. Let us become whole. And then, when we say, I trust you, it will not be the cry of the unresolved self. It will be the offering of a soul who has walked through the dark and returned with their light intact. If you'd like, I can continue this exploration through a related lens, such as how this principle affects leadership, healing, or spiritual transformation. To speak of trust is to speak of the architecture of human relationship. It is the invisible thread that binds one soul to another, the silent bridge we walk across when we say, "I see you," and mean it. But trust, in its truest form, is not easily won, nor easily kept. It is not given blindly, nor should it be. True trust is not a reflex, not a transaction, not the result of charm, charisma, or shared desire. It is the outcome of something far deeper, far more demanding, a journey into conscious awareness. The tragedy of human interaction lies not in betrayal, but in the illusion that trust can be given without inner clarity. We are often taught that trust is a virtue in itself, that to trust is to be good, loving, open. But when trust is granted in absence of awareness, it becomes a gamble with the soul. It is like stepping onto a bridge in the fog, never asking if the ground beneath it is solid, never asking if we even know where we are standing ourselves. True trust begins not with the other, but with the self, and not just the surface self, the polite self, the competent self, the self that smiles and shakes hands. No, true trust requires an encounter with the full breadth of one's inner world. It requires the courage to descend into the labyrinth of the psyche, to meet not just the idealized self, but also the shadow. To ask, "Oh, where am I really when no one is looking? What parts of me am I still afraid of? Where deceive myself?" Until these questions are confronted, we cannot speak of trust, because we cannot know what we are offering or why. We often think of trust as something we extend outward, but it is equally something we extend inward. Do we trust ourselves to discern truth from illusion? Do we trust ourselves to hold boundaries, to recognize manipulation, to stay rooted in our values when faced with charm or pressure? Do we trust ourselves not to abandon ourselves in the presence of another? These are the crucibles of conscious trust, and they are formed in solitude, not in the presence of others. There are many who walk through life disconnected from their own depths. They speak of trust, but they have never met themselves. Their inner world remains a stranger, filled with hidden motives, buried wounds, and inherited patterns. They do not trust others, they simply attach. They project their own unlived stories onto whoever is closest and call it intimacy. They hand over the keys to their heart not out of understanding, but out of need. This is not trust. It is abandonment of the self in exchange for momentary relief. Conscious awareness is the antidote to this pattern. It is the slow, often painful process of becoming known to oneself. It asks us to witness the full spectrum of our emotions, not just the noble ones, but the ones we hide. It asks us to revisit the moments we would rather forget, the betrayals, the shames, the losses, and see how they continue to shape the way we relate to others. It asks us to see where we manipulate, where we pretend, where we seek power in disguise. This is not self-rejection, it is self-integration. It is the recognition that all parts of us have a place, a story, a reason. And when we integrate these parts, when we stop pretending to be less than or more than we are, we arrive at something rare, authenticity. From this place, trust is no longer a performance. It is a reality. When you are rooted in awareness, you can trust yourself to observe without needing to immediately act. You can trust yourself to feel desire without collapsing into it. You can trust yourself to recognize red flags without explaining them away. And when you trust yourself in this way, you become trustworthy to others, not because you promise perfection, but because you are willing to remain in truth. From this ground of self-awareness, a new kind of trust becomes possible. A trust that extends outward, but not blindly. A trust that sees the other not through fantasy, but through presence. You no longer need to project your unmet needs onto them. You no longer need to mold them into your missing parent, your redeemer, your savior. You can see them as they are, flawed, complex, evolving, and you can allow them to see you in the same way. This mutual recognition is the birthplace of true intimacy. It is not born in intensity, but in honesty. It does not require perfection, but it does require presence. It allows both people to show up fully, with their joy and their sorrow, their hope and their fear. It says, I know who I am. I am learning who you are. Let us walk together, not to complete each other, but to witness each other. But even here, trust is not static. It is not a box to be checked or a state to be declared. It is a living, breathing organism. It grows in moments, small, repeated, sacred moments. Moments where the self remains intact in the face of pressure. Moments where truth is spoken even when it is hard. Moments where space is given without fear. Moments where both people choose depth over comfort, clarity over ease. Trust built in this way is resilient. It can weather storms because it was not born in illusion. It was not built on the shifting sands of projection. It was carved from the stone of reality. And it holds, not because it never falters, but because it knows how to repair. But to arrive here, we must first shed the cultural myths that surround trust. We must stop believing that vulnerability means openness without discernment. We must stop glorifying immediate closeness as a sign of connection. We must stop equating trust with agreement or obedience. True trust does not ask for conformity. It asks for authenticity. It asks for the strength to say, "Pan, this is who I am," and the grace to say, I am willing to learn who you are. And so the journey continues, not outward, but inward. For every time we deepen our awareness of ourselves, we sharpen our ability to see others. Every time we meet a new layer of our own shadow, we extend compassion to the shadows of others. Every time we reclaim a disowned part of ourselves, we become more capable of holding space for the full humanity of those we love. It is tempting to rush past this work, to declare ourselves trustworthy before we have done the work, to demand trust before we have earned it. But the psyche knows, the body knows, there is a wisdom that cannot be fooled. And it speaks in silence, in intuition, in the subtle pull toward or away from another. If we do not hear it, it is not because it is not speaking. It is because we have forgotten how to listen. To live a life of conscious trust is to live a life of reverence for the self, for the other, for the sacred space that exists between two souls who choose to meet without masks. It is not easy. It requires patience, humility, and a willingness to be undone. But it is worth it. For in that space, we find what we have always longed for. Not just to be seen, but to be known. And not just to be known, but to be trusted. And in being trusted, truly and deeply, we remember what it means to be human. Not perfect, not fixed, but present, aware, alive. Let this be the place we begin.